Hey everybody, welcome back to round 34 of Inside the Clinch. Eric here, as always, alongside Johnny, bringing you another week of MMA. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. Still digesting the food that you and I had yesterday. How you doing? How's your stomach holding up?
It's good. That food was amazing. For those that didn't see Johnny's post on our social media, we went to this Middle Eastern, I think it was a Lebanese spot. Al Zaatar was the name. Amazing food. If you guys are in the New York area, you should definitely go check that out.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many people actually saw that post. I believe it was maybe like 3 or 4 people, but I posted it on our MMA page on Instagram, and I realized pretty quickly that I did that and I took it off. But the food was amazing. It was basically a lot of like pitas and falafels and shawarma. It was really good, and it was recommended by one of our friends that doesn't really have the best of recommendations. So it was good to finally go to a nice spot.
Yeah, the food was great. We had a really exciting card this past weekend. We have another really exciting one this coming weekend. We're also going to be joined shortly by Aaron Bronsteter. He's a very respected guy in the MMA community, so it's going to be an honor to have him on. So, John, let's just talk through this past card, give our opinions on what we saw, what happened, and
Yeah.
we'll be joined momentarily by Mr. Aaron.
Yeah, so let's just start it off with the main event: Islam Makhachev versus Thiago Moises. The fight played out exactly how I thought it would. Thiago Moises did a really good job. I thought he's a really durable fighter, but there's levels to this shit. And Islam put on a clinic on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see, I guess, or he's rather starting to show all the things that Khabib and the guys over at AKA are saying about him. The dude's a stud. Um, there are rumors in the locker that not only is he able to compete with Khabib as far as wrestling, but he outstrikes Khabib when they partner up and they do some sparring training. Look, Islam is only a couple of years younger than Khabib, and he is having some difficulties in his career just getting the fights that he wants. So it's hard for him to gain traction. It's hard for him to get the fans to like him just because he's not as active as he would like to be. But look, man, he's a very dominant force. He's talking shit to a lot of people. He's saying a lot of people are ducking him. After the fight,
Yeah,
he called out RDA, which was a pretty good call out. But I think the biggest takeaway for me from this fight was the sportsmanship just between Islam and Thiago Moises throughout the whole event. You know, last week we saw the whole drama show that went down between Connor and Dustin, but these two guys, Thiago Moises and Islam Makhachev, you know, they were very friendly before, during, and after the fight, and you know that's a very very nice sight.
yeah. Thiago Moises came to the fight extremely confident. I was really impressed with his demeanor. He's going in there to fight like a trained assassin from Dagestan, and he's there confident. He thought he was going to win, and I thought he did a good job. But you know, a lot of people they're discrediting Islam. They're saying that Islam is not as good as you and I think he is, which is kind of like ridiculous to see to imagine because he's just putting on a clinic every single fight. You know, some fights he's looking a little bit better than others, but for the most part, he's not really having any difficulty in any of his past few fights. He's, I believe, on a 7 fight winning streak right now. So he's on a long winning streak, and he's dominant in most of those fights. So I don't really see what other people are seeing.
Look, up until Khabib's last two fights, everyone was talking shit and saying he wasn't good either. People only really became fans of Khabib's, I feel like, over his last two, maybe three fights. Before that, everyone was also saying how Khabib sucks. All he does is grapple. He has no hands. Any good striker would knock him out. Look, at the end of the career, they're all on the fan boat. You and I have seen the work that Islam does with this team. You know, we've been following those Dagestani crazy motherfuckers for a while now. So, I mean, look, one thing that they do have is a work ethic. They wake up early, they train. All they know is eat, sleep, train. Like that's all they live for. I don't know. Look, one I guess critique I have on Islam, I would like to see him let his hands go a little bit more. He did say in the post-fight press conference how his corner was asking for the takedowns and to secure the takedown because it's obviously a safer and more dominant position. But
Yeah,
for the
father's
striking
father's plan, father's
father's
plan.
plan. But honestly, for the striking exchange that did happen, Islam did seem, I don't know if hesitant is the right word, but he didn't let his hands fly as loosely as I feel like I would expect him to, just because of how much better he is, how much bigger he was. I would have just expected his hands and striking to be a little bit more loose in there.
Yeah, I do see what you're saying. I do believe he was a little hesitant, but you know, he's not a striker. He's predominantly a wrestler. So I guess he's not as comfortable in that department, but he was saying that he wanted to strike, but he heard Javier from the corner screaming at him to do father's plan because father's plan is the only plan. So, you know,
Number one.
He listened to Javier Mendez and he got the job done. But after the fight, you said that he called out RDA. Beneil Dariush is in the picture. There's Michael Chandler's in the picture.
Dan
Who do
Hooker
you?
too.
Dan Hooker has been talking a lot of shit as well. But who do you think is the appropriate matchup for Islam at this stage in his career?
Honestly, I thought RDA was good initially just because of where RDA is in his career. He was supposed to fight Khabib. That fight never played out. So I think for Islam to get a win over someone like RDA, it'll be a good way for him to get closer to that title contention spot that he wants to be at. But I don't know. Dan Hooker's talking a lot of crap about him. I think he's going to destroy Hooker. Honestly, the Beneil Dariush fight, I like it a lot for Islam. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit too high in the rankings for him for Beneil Dariush to say okay, but I love the matchup, and I think either one of those guys, whoever wins that matchup, I think it could easily be a title shot.
Yeah, both very tough guys. Beneil Dariush, off the top of my head, I believe he's somewhere close to 5 or 6 fight winning streak. Islam looks unbeatable. And just what pisses me off is people on social media saying that Islam is just like they're calling Islam like the 2.0 of Khabib. Not the 2.0, the bootleg version of Khabib. And I really don't see where that's coming from. Like Khabib had his flaws as well. He wasn't a great fighter when in the striking department. So Islam has some areas that he's not great in, and I believe he's still developing. And I personally don't think anybody in the division could beat him right now. That's just my personal take. And I think that either by this year, not this year, I would say by the end of 2022, I think that Islam Machachev is going to be our new lightweight champion.
Yeah, look, so Beneil Dariush is actually coming on a 7-fight winning streak now with a win over Tony Ferguson. So the guy is riding very hot. And he's also another one of those guys in the lightweight division that's not getting as much traction, I feel like, as he should for being as good as he is and being as high up in that division as he is. And yeah, going back to what you were saying about like the guys on social media. So it was like what I said earlier. A lot of people are saying how Islam isn't that good. He's just the shadow of Khabib, and Khabib is the greatest, and Islam will never get there. Look, Islam is only 28 years old. He has plenty of time to improve still. He's already far ahead as far as his abilities than a lot of the people in his division. I would just like to see him get in there more often, and I would hope by this time next year he would be champ, but I feel like there aren't enough fights happening at the top of the lightweight division for it to move. So I feel like that inactivity may be harder for him to make his way up, just because there are a few people now that are qualified to fight for the belt, and some of those fights need to play out and need to happen before we can see how Islam fits into the picture a few months from now.
Yeah, and also as you mentioned, I would have to agree with you that I don't think that the best version of Islam showed up on Saturday night. He looked a little bit. I don't know if the right word to put is nervous, but he looked like he was a little gun shy, and like he didn't really look comfortable in the octagon on Saturday night as opposed to his other performances. But even that level of Islam was enough to destroy a very tough Thiago Moises, a person that thought he was better in the striking department, which was clearly not the case. And Thiago Moises, a very, very well-versed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, got submitted by Islam Makhchev. What does that say? There's this Dagestani Sambo is better than black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sometimes. It's matchups make fights, man.
I was honestly a bit surprised at how hesitant he was standing up. Islam, I would feel like Islam would be a bit more hesitant to take Thiago Moises to the ground just because of how good Moises' jiu-jitsu is. He did win our Submission of the Year award last year. So, look, the guy has some very, very nice submissions. And he's sneaky with it, you know what I mean? He's very experienced. So he knows how to secure those
Yeah,
submissions without you even noticing.
but that's what I'm saying. That's like he could secure those submissions, but not against somebody like an Islam Makhachev. And I know Islam Makhachev is probably not like a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
He's a world champion in Sambo, and that's if not better, it's just as equivalent.
Yeah, I'm just saying
To
that
being
it's a bit surprising that he was, I guess, more comfortable to take Thiago Moises to the ground instead of standing up with him. I would feel like Islam would have a greater gap advantage as far as the striking. I feel like they would be a little bit closer as far as the grappling, but we saw how that played out this Saturday.
I think the ground game is. I feel like that's just Islam's world, and that's where he feels most comfortable. And I don't think he feels the threat from. I believe nobody in the world poses a threat to him at this point in his career. To be honest.
All right, so I think either Beneil Dariush or RDA. Who do you think would be the next fight for Islam that makes sense realistically?
Realistically, RDA, he's gonna walk through RDA. Benil Dariush is a really tough guy. He's not the most technical guy, but he's very strong. I feel like he's very hungry at the moment. he's trying to get the title just as Islam is. So I feel like that would be the more competitive fight and the more entertaining fight. And I would rather see that fight.
Look, imagine they put that fight. I'm thinking about it now. Imagine they put this fight down in Abu Dhabi for Fight Island. Both Middle Eastern guys, they have huge following in that area of the world. Not saying they should headline the card necessarily because there might be some bigger names, but you can easily get a lot of fans' attention if you market this fight correctly in the Middle East.
I mean, if this happens in a few months, they could definitely headline because if
They're
you
going
look
back
at
in October.
if you look at the narrative right now, it's all about Islam Machachev. If you like search on Google MMA news, all that's going to come up right now is Dan Hooker talking shit to Islam Machachev. So his name is becoming more popular in the MMA community. So who knows what's going to happen in a few months? I could see him headlining in Abu Dhabi, and that's going to be absolutely insane. They once built an arena for Khabib, as as your boy Chill likes to say.
Look,
So maybe they'll build another one for Islam, Who knows?
I think fights like RDA is going to be easy for Islam. I think fights like Dan Hooker is going to be easy. Where it gets a little bit more complicated, I think, is when you get to people like Justin Gaethje, Michael Chandler, that top of the division, Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, those four there. That's where I would give, Islam a close run for his money. But look, I think anyone else in the division, not really a threat, in my opinion.
Do you think Dustin Poirier is a threat? I mean, Dustin Poirier is a tough guy.
He's tough. Yeah. He has heart. And look, he has a lot of experience. Don't forget, Islam doesn't
true.
have as much experience as a lot of other people do his age. Again, because of the lack of activity, because people don't want to fight with him. He has a lot of time in the workout room, in the training room, and on the mats, but it's not the same as being in the performance.
I mean, Islam is not no scrub. He's like, what is he now? Like 17-1?
Something like that, yeah.
He has 18 professional fights plus all the Sambo stuff. I mean, I don't know. I would agree with you that Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, who else? I mean, maybe Michael Chandler we could put in the mix.
I feel like Michael Chandler's a bit small, but
you heard the nonsense that Michael Chandler said today?
No, I heard some funny things over the broadcast, but I didn't hear anything today.
Oh no, he basically said that wrestling is superior to Sambo, and that's how.
Name me one wrestler that's out grappled a Sambo guy.
I mean, I don't know. I'm sure it happened in history, but nah. I don't know. Nah, man.
All right, John. Another big fight that was this past Saturday. We had Miesha Tate, Mommy Tate, returning to the UFC after her retirement. She took on Marion Reneau, who was actually making her final UFC performance. So happy retirement to Marion. Congratulations to Miesha Tate. What do you think of the performance?
Yeah, man. The cupcake is back. Honestly, her performance wasn't anything spectacular. She clearly won the fight. She won rounds 1, 2, and then she got the submission in round 3. She was clearly the better fighter, but that was also not the greatest person in the division, and also a 44-year-old Marion Reneau. So I don't know how much stock you want to put into the fight. Miesha Tate did come back after a 5-year hiatus, so maybe she's just trying to find her rhythm again, but to be honest, I don't really see her matching up with Amanda Nunes she beat Holly Holm before. Maybe that could happen again. But as far as becoming the champion in the division, as when she left, I don't think it's going to happen now either.
Yeah, look, like she beat Holly Holm. It was different then. She was actively training then. I think it was safe to say she was still on her peak at the time or just coming off her peak. Look, since then she's had, I think, 2 kids. I think it was more than 1 kid, but she's been focusing on being a mom, which seems like it's been making her very happy. But look, she said she's not coming back in for a paycheck. She's not just coming back in for the attention. She's coming back in for the belt. I don't see her being any of the females in any weight class. Who? She's not going to beat Nunes. She's not going to beat Shevchenko. She probably won't beat Wei Li, even if they were the same weight class. Or sorry, Rose, not Wei Li. But like, who is she going to? She might have a few interesting fights. She might be able to make a couple $100,000, maybe a couple $1 million before all is said and done. But well, I guess a couple million is pushing it. But regardless, I don't see her really getting to the title shot, let alone getting her hands on the title again. That's just my take.
I know she's saying that she wants to be the champion, but I think it's more of she misses the sport. This is what she's done for a very long time, and she wanted to be around the environment again. And now she's here. She's successful in her first fight. So, let's see what happens. But based on her performance, it doesn't really look like she's going to accomplish too much. She might win a few more fights here and there. But as I said, I don't really think she's going to really do anything in the division, to be honest.
Yeah, she's fairly well-rounded, and she's been in the game for a long time, so she has a lot of experience. But like you said, there's too much talent in the division, in the females division, starting to pop up now. Like I say, always time away from the sport is always going to negatively impact you, which is, and I'm not going to say we saw this here, but once she does fight another step or two up in competition, we definitely are, or I'm expecting to see these adverse
And it's
reactions
and it's not your conventional layoff. It's 5 years. The
of
last
being
time
a
she,
mom.
yeah, after being a mom as well. So, and they posted that picture of like the champions when she left, and it's like a completely different roster without a few people. But it's a completely different sport now, and 5 years is a very long time. I could keep saying the same thing over and over. I just don't see her being the champion
I agree. Yeah. Look,
again. But if this makes her happy, let her do her thing.
I wish her luck. Hope she stays safe and healthy. But yeah, realistically, I don't see her getting her hands on her belt. But hey,
Yeah,
look, do what you love, and hope you get a few more fights in and cash out. Well
yeah.
deserved.
I'm always team Cupcake.
All right, man. Moving on to this weekend's card: Cory Sandhagen versus Tj Dillashaw. TJ is returning after a 2 or 2.5 year suspension from USADA after getting caught for using EPO. A lot of controversy going on in this fight. Will TJ be the same when he comes back? Will his power be there? Will the cardio be there? How will the weight cut be? A lot of questions around this fight. Not to take anything away from the guy across the octagon, Cory Sandhagen, eagerly trying to make his title run. He hit a bit of a road bump when he fought Aljamain Sterling and got a loss, a very quick submission, rear naked choke. But since then, he's been on a run, and Sandhagen's looking great, man. What's your take on this fight?
I mean, San Hagen is on a 2-fight winning streak. He beat Marlon Moraes after that, and he also beat Frankie Edgar after that. So, I mean, I feel like the difference in this fight is going to be the wrestling. A lot of people forget that TJ Dillashaw is predominantly a wrestler, and Cory Sandhagen, he's a very well-versed striker. But I feel like the experience factor, I don't know how the layoff is going to affect TJ, but I feel like the experience factor, I feel like TJ is stronger, and I feel like if this fight gets to the ground, it's going to be a tough night for Sandhagen.
So Cory Sandhagen actually won 9 of his last 10 fights. 7 of those were by finish. We've seen him have the knockout power. He has 6 wins by knockout, and he has 3 wins by sub. So look, the guy's well versed standing up and on the ground. Look, like I said, a lot of questions are going to be around TJ Dillashaw and how he returns from the suspension. USADA has been watching him very, very closely. They've been testing him, testing his urine. I think they went all the way back for his last few fights, and they're going to be testing him very closely for this fight. Um, Look, the weight cut was a big, big deal for TJ. This was something he was complaining about back then. I shouldn't say complaining about, but we knew this was an issue back then as well. Now that he's not recovering with EPOs or other illegal substances, how is he going to perform? Is the weight cut going to be all right? Is he going to feel okay the next day? They could really impact his conditioning. It can really diminish his strength. All these things that were, that gave TJ an advantage in that weight division. Now all these things are up in the air. I don't know. I think this fight is really going to come down to how does TJ return. We all know Cory Sandhagen is a savage, and he's in there to win no matter what.
Yeah, well, according to TJ, he believes that those things didn't really affect him being a champion. He says that it was his technique more than his use of illegal substances such as EPOs. But that's just his words. Who knows if they're true?
I
Um,
agree, but look, his speed and power for that division was relatively great. You know what I mean? So it's not just a technique. Like we said, for John Jones, like say what you want about steroids, no steroids. He won it. He was winning, in my opinion, because he had a diverse tool set. He had striking, he had wrestling. He wasn't particularly fast for the division, wasn't particularly strong for the division. But Cody, on the other hand, he was much stronger, much faster than a lot of people in his division.
well, I don't think EPOs really have. I don't know if they really play a role in agility. I think
Okay, I'm,
EPOs
I'm just talking out my ass. I guess I haven't really.
E- EPOs are basically red blood cells, which basically transfers oxygen in your body. So taking EPOs basically have more oxygen in your body, so you get tired.
Mhm.
You get less tired, or it takes you a longer time to get tired. So you understand what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
I'm not really sure. Maybe it does. I'm not really sure. I would have to look into that, but I don't know if that would have played into the agility factor of his overall MMA game.
All right. So who's your take on this fight, Cory or TJ?
I'm gonna have to go with my boy Tj Dillashaw. I know he's coming off a loss to Henry Cejudo, or pretty bad loss, but I think he just got caught slipping. He was just on the Brendan Schaub podcast, and he talked about that briefly. But I think that he's gonna piece this together and become the new UFC champion eventually.
So let me just say, I was actually in the building when Henry Cejudo knocked out TJ Dillashaw or TKO'd him. I was fortunate. I was working at MSG at the time, and they were able to hook me up with a suite at Barclays. So it was great experience. That fight though ended so fast. I was like, the fight just started, and then the fight was over. Like it was a very weird feeling. Like you can tell TJ got his ass beat, but it wasn't exactly a knockout. Like, as we've heard for months,
Got caught slipping.
He got caught slipping, and he wasn't out. The ref stopped it a bit early. I think another punch or two would have, sealed the deal. But
I don't know. I actually just rewatched that fight right before us recording this. I don't know if it was stopped early. Like there are a lot of fights that have been stopped at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that's the right thing.
I mean, you could make the case that and say that it was a title fight, so maybe let it go a little longer. But
look, he took some big shots, but I don't think he went out. To be honest,
he wasn't completely out, but he fell down. He got up and then he fell down again.
Yeah. Look, Cejudo watched him. Regardless, the outcome is Cejudo watched him.
He got caught slipping, and Henry Cejudo was the victor that night. But I don't know if he's a better fighter overall. Maybe he is. Cejudo's a freaking beast himself, so I don't know.
I think I'm gonna have to lean towards Sandhagen on this fight, but it definitely will come down to how TJ comes back. And I think seeing the first 30 seconds to a minute of that fight, I think I'll be able to make up my mind as far as who I got.
I don't know. The reason I'm kind of leaning towards TJ over Sandhagen is we saw what happened with Sterling. Sterling took him to the floor, and
that's the reason why I'm rooting for Sandhagen. I want him to avenge that loss. I want him to make it back up there. Either fight Sterling, get that win back. Because look, all the props to Sterling. It was a beautiful, quick win. But if they fight again or 10 times, I don't see anything going similar to the way it did their first matchup.
I mean, we'll see. First of all, Sterling has to get through Jan. I believe that fight is close to being made. So hopefully, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing happens with that fight, and we see that fight soon. Because I want to see Jan as the champion once again, and stop seeing this Sterling. Sterling just pisses me off, man.
Hell yeah! All right, guys, we will momentarily be joined by TSN Sports MMA reporter and content editor Aaron Bronsteter. We're very excited to have him on. But before we continue, guys, just want to give a quick shout and ask you guys to like, subscribe, and comment on our social medias if you haven't already. On Instagram, we are Inside the Clinch MMA. On Twitter, we are ITC MMA Podcast. And on Facebook and YouTube, we are Inside the Clinch MMA Podcast.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Inside the Clinch. Today, we have a very special guest that many of you will probably know. He is TSN Sports MMA reporter and content editor, and also the host of TSN MMA Show podcast. I want to give a warm welcome to Aaron Bronsteter. Aaron, first of all, I'd like to thank you for joining us. It's not every day we have a Canadian on the podcast, so it's awesome to have you on.
Well, my pleasure. I'm happy to represent the great country of Canada. When are you guys introducing the special guest, though? I'm waiting to hear who it is.
You are the special guest.
Oh, it's me. My mistake.
We're playing with you. He's coming on any moment now.
All right, great.
All right, I'm going to start off with the first question. So I saw you tweeting about Islam Machachev a few nights ago. Some opponents that you mentioned were Beneil Dariush, Tony Ferguson, RDA, and Michael Chandler. Do you see him defeating those names that I just mentioned?
Well, you probably have to look at it person by person. But here's the problem when you're trying to predict something like that. Islam has looked so dominant, and the numbers show that he's one of the most dominant fighters really in UFC history, if you look at it just by the numbers. But you also have to look at the opposition. And he hasn't fought anybody just yet that you would really say has challenged him, has really brought out the best in him, I would say. I mean, Thiago Moises was a ranked guy, ranked 14th, great fighter, but I still would like to see him fight a guy in the top 10, a guy in the top 5. Like if you look at Khabib and compare where Khabib was at this stage in his career versus where Islam was at, Khabib had already fought RDA. I think he had already fought Ali Akinta and won the title. He was already running through a lot of the best guys in the division, whereas Islam, I don't think, has fought the best guys. And I don't think that's his fault. I think a lot of these guys have been offered fights with him. And when you have a high ranking, it's very risky to put that ranking on the line. And that's one of the problems I have with the ranking system in the UFC is that we don't get to see a lot of these great fights because guys that are ranked are worried about losing the ranking that they've worked so hard to get to because they know they're going to be facing someone who, hey, might be better than they are. I mean, if you look at Islam Machachev, he's not a guy that you want to face if you're a potent striker, if you're really good at striking and you don't have a great wrestling game, it's, chances are he's going to be able to take you down and hold you there. And that's what a lot of people worry about when they're looking for their upcoming opponent. They want to have a good stylistic matchup. And hey, Islam's not a great stylistic matchup for a lot of these guys in the top 10 of the division.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really good point. But aside from the sample size, I know Islam hasn't fought the biggest names, but this fight, let's look at this last fight with Thiago Moises. What did you think of his performance that night on Saturday night?
He was great. I thought that sometimes during the beginning of rounds, he was a bit hesitant, especially in the first round. I thought he was really hesitant, and I don't know why that was. I don't know if he wanted to prove that he could stand with Moises, because I think Moises is a good striker. I don't think he's an elite striker or a great striker. I think he's a very good striker. And I think Islam's a very good striker. I don't think that Islam gets enough credit for how good he is on the feet. Like a lot of those guys, like, a lot of people see Nurmagomedov as a last name, and they think that they're wrestlers. But look at like Said Nurmagomedov, for example, is a better striker than he is a grappler, in my opinion. So whenever you see that guy fighting, always bet the knockout prop on Said Nurmagomedov, because people think he's this decision wrestler because of his last name. He's actually a fantastic striker, works with Mark Henry out in New Jersey. And you can kind of say the same for Umar Nurmagomedov, great grappler and also a very good striker. So people kind of don't give these guys enough credit because they automatically think Khabib, they think of guys that are going to smother people. But here's the thing. In the corner with Islam Makhachev, they're saying, take this guy down. We know that you're better than him on the ground. Take him down. Do what you do best. Because he's trying to show that he can be a good striker. But I agree with his corner. Just dominate. Take him down. Take the path of least resistance. This is the way that you're going to get to the title, not by trying to stand with these guys. So I think that he probably could have started grappling a little bit earlier. But hey, I mean, it was still a dominant performance across the board. I don't think he was in any trouble at all in that fight. So that's what you like to see out of a guy that has championship potential.
Yeah, Islam was... Father's plan.
Yeah, father's plan. Yeah, take the guy down. Do what you're good at.
So Islam, he has only one loss on his record, and I feel like when a lot of people compare him to Khabib, they look at Khabib's undefeated record and compare it to Islam's loss. He had one loss, and that was back in 2015. And look, it's the sport of MMA. Things happen. You get caught sometimes. I feel like some, haters of Islam, they give that a little bit too much weight. I feel like he's evolved a lot since then, and just the team that he's working with is phenomenal. And he's just shown so much growth since that time in 2015 that I feel like it's almost not fair to compare him to that same person.
And, that might be a good thing, because right now everybody's saying he's the next Khabib. He's the next champion. He's the guy who's following in his footsteps. If he was undefeated, that would just be another pressure put on this guy who seems like a guy that, Khabib, when he was on the mic before fights, he would really rise to the occasion. He would talk a lot of trash about his opponents, about how he was going to smash them. It doesn't come naturally to Islam. He's a little bit more soft-spoken, a little bit more reserved. So these pressures, I think, make him a little bit anxious. And you could tell at the beginning of that fight, he was a little bit anxious. It's his first main event. He's got a lot to live up to. He's got a lot of pressure really on him to... Listen, they're saying Khabib retired so that they could make room for Islam to come and basically become anointed the next champion. That's a lot of pressure to put on one guy's back. So maybe that loss to Adriano Martins all those years ago was a good thing for him. Now he doesn't have to worry about staying undefeated, and he knows what it's like to lose. And maybe that will make him a little bit less of a risk taker in these fights. He doesn't need to prove that he's this great striker. Just do what you do best. Stick to the game plan, stick to the script, and you're going to be fine. So maybe that loss ends up being a good thing for him, all things considered.
Islam is not really the most outspoken, but I feel like that's because there's a language barrier. I feel like Khabib was like that in the beginning of his career as well. But as he learned how to speak in English, he became more vocal and started saying that I'll smash you, I'll smash this guy, I'll smash that guy. I feel like that'll come with Islam, but he's just not there in his career at this point.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, even looking back at Khabib's career, he was always kind of a joker. He had a good sense of humor. Islam just kind of looks like he's happy to be wherever he is. He's very just laid back and mellow, and I think that's okay. Not everybody can be Khabib and be exactly like him. And he started to open up a little bit more as fight week came along and talked about how he was going to smash Moises and smash whoever's in his way, and says he can beat Poirier. Like, those are the kind of things that are going to get him out of his shell. But I think it's the kind of thing that he knows he needs to do to get attention, because that's what this game is. It's promotion. Khabib said that when McGregor fought Alvarez at UFC 205, he knew that he wasn't a big enough star to get that. He knew that he could win. He knew that he could be the champion, but he didn't think he was a big enough star to be in that spotlight. He just said, give me any fight in New York. A lot of Russian people in New York. It's the first ever fight at MSG. Give me anybody. And they gave him Michael Johnson. And he's talked about that, how he wasn't ready for the spotlight at that point in time. I think Islam might be in that same stage where he's not just ready quite yet to be in the spotlight. And I think now that he's won a main event that a lot of people were watching, he was trending on Twitter. It was an easy win for him. those are the kind of things that are going to get him more and more acclimated to becoming a star. And even when I spoke to him last week, I said, what's it like having a main event? And he said, I didn't realize how much media there was going to be. I didn't realize how much I was going to have to do to carry the event, to promote the event. But getting that opportunity, I think, is just going to ease him into that a little bit more seamlessly.
Yeah, the reason I say that I think that Islam is going to open up a little bit is because Eric and I are both Russian speaking. And in Russian, he's very outspoken. He's making jokes all the time. He's like a different person when he's speaking in Russian. So that's why I think he's going to open up a little bit when he learns the language a little bit more. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to pull some Russian out here. Spasiba, brat. And I try to talk Russian to these guys whenever I can. I know privyet is hello. Yep. And spasiba, brat is thank you, brother. And that's about it. I know a lot of swear words because I grew up with Russian friends, so I can swear in Russian. But outside of that, that's about all I've got in.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah,
as long as you could swear.
Knowing how to swear in different languages can come in very handy if when you're driving or anything along those lines.
Yeah, so let me ask you about the co-main event this past weekend. We had Miesha Tate making a return after a 5-year layoff. Mommy Tate. So I guess first off, were you impressed with her performance against Reneo, and do you buy her notion of her being quote unquote back?
Yeah, I think she's back. And listen, this is a division that does not have a lot of players right now because Amanda Nunes has beaten all of them, and Miesha included. But you also need to have names. You need to have people that sell, and Miesha sells. This is a good story right now. And if she can carry that momentum, win 1 or 2 more fights, she'll be in the title fight. Can she beat Amanda Nunes? I don't think so, but that's not taking anything away from Miesha. That's just the nature of the beast. The only champion that is still the champion when Miesha Tate last fought is Amanda Nunes. Everybody else has lost the title somewhere along the way, rather. So, I think Miesha Tate looks great. She was fighting somebody who was 44 years old, right? So it was a fight that was kind of tailor-made to make her look good. But this weekend, you've got Aspen Ladd against Macy Chiasson. I think the winner of that fight is kind of in the mix. You got Aldana with that great knockout 2 weeks ago. She's in the mix. Holm, Durandame, they're in the mix. So she needs to beat one of those people before she can get into the title conversation. And I think Holly Holm, is the best fight you can make for Miesha Tate next. I think that Holly wants that fight. She wants to avenge that loss. She was beating Miesha Tate until she wasn't, until Miesha took her back and submitted her and became the champion. So I think that would be a fight that makes a lot of sense. Holly's a lot older now. I think she's 38, 39. Yeah. So it's actually a good position for Miesha to show that she can still beat somebody that's at that really high level, like a Holly Holm.
Look, Johnny and I were talking earlier, and we mentioned that she said that she's not coming back just for a fight, just for some extra money, from some extra publicity. She wants to actually come back and get the gold. But I agree. I don't see her realistically getting her hands on the belt. And like you said, it is pretty stacked up at the top of the division. The bottom of the division isn't as crazy as some of the other divisions that we've seen in the UFC. So she could have a few great fights, make some money, and, get some good headlines. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure if I can see her winning the belt.
Yeah, well, to me, you need to beat Holm or Durandame to get a title shot. I mean, Durandame had that great win over Aspen Ladd. And who did she beat after Aspen Ladd? She beat somebody else that was, again, somebody trying to get into the title mix. And then you had Holly, who beat someone else that was trying to get into the title mix. I'm trying to remember who that is too. But they both won on the same, I think it was either on the same night or in back-to-back weeks. And I was like, they're the 2 top contenders again, even though they've already just recently lost to Nunes. They need somebody to beat one of those 2 girls in order to really break through and become a contender.
I would have to agree with that. Moving along the card, we had Mateusz Gamrat. This was a really short fight. He basically dismantled Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens now is on I believe a 5-fight losing streak. So what are your thoughts on Jeremy Stephens at this point in his career? Do you think the UFC is going to consider cutting him, or what do you think? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, here's the thing with Jeremy Stephens. When he was a featherweight, he was a massive featherweight. He was a huge guy, and he had that physicality where he was able to kind of push people around. Now at 55, he's just a regular lightweight, right? Like he's not anything daunting. You look at a guy like Dustin Poirier, imagine how much bigger he is than Jeremy Stephens. Like there are a lot of really big 55ers. And at this stage in his career, I wouldn't want him to cut that extra weight to get to 45. It's not really necessary, but he needs to win. If he wants to stick around, he needs to win. He's still a big name, but you're also seeing in the UFC, they're starting to cut a lot of these guys that make more money, that have been around for a long time because it's cost effective. They cut Junior Dos Santos. They cut Alistair Overeem. Years ago, they never would have done that. They would have just hung on to these guys, let them continue to fight, and not let the competition get them. At this point in time, they're willing to cut bait. And even Bellator today, they cut Matt Mitrione after this weekend. They're cutting guys also that are making too much money. They're trimming the fat. So the UFC, I think, they know they're going to get exciting fights with Stephens, but if they're not, like this past weekend wasn't an exciting fight on the Stephens end of things, I don't know how much longer this guy has in the promotion. That might have been his last fight. I guess we'll have to see. Not to mention that pushing Drakkar Klose doesn't help the situation either.
Yeah,
injuring a guy, and they've now had to implement rules that fighters can't lay hands on another fighter at weigh-ins or ceremonial weigh-ins. Otherwise, they're going to get fined and suspended. So I don't think that he's in the best graces right now of the UFC brass.
That should have been a rule a long time ago, in my opinion.
And his comments afterwards were ridiculous as well. So. But yeah, just to be fair, but he's fighting some of the biggest names in the division. He lost to Calvin Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Sabit, Jose Aldos. These are some of the biggest names in the division. So I mean, if the UFC decides to cut him, I would understand. But I don't know. I would give him another shot. He's such an exciting fighter,
Well, he should probably have regretted the fact that he pushed Drakkar Klose, because that's a much easier matchup than Gamrat. Gamrat's a beast. I mean, he was like the main training partner for Thiago Moises going into this past weekend. He's like one of these guys that's training with Poirier day in and day out, all these great, talented guys at ATT. So maybe Drakkar Klose would have been a better plan. I think Stephens would have had a much better chance against him.
I agree. So pivoting to this weekend's upcoming fight, we have Sandhagen versus Dillashaw. Tj Dillashaw is coming back after roughly a 2-year suspension by USADA. Do you see TJ coming back and picking up where he left off?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, Sandhagen, I think, is one of these guys that would have really given him a push even when Dillashaw was the champion 2 years ago. And from what I understand, these guys used to train together in Denver. Yeah. And people always kind of talk about how Sandhagen used to get the better of him in training. He used to really frustrate TJ in training. Again, that's just from what I understand from talking to people that were in that camp at the time at Team Elevation, including some of the coaches there. So I think that we're going to see a very competitive fight. I think that TJ, even if he is in his best form, still has a really tough matchup ahead of him. And that's why I don't know what we're going to, unless Dillashaw wins, if he loses to Sandhagen, I don't know how much that necessarily means. Like, he would be losing to a guy that I think is a top 2, top 3 guy in that division. I mean, even though he lost to Aljamain, I think a lot of people thought he was going to beat Aljamain Sterling and think that if they had a rematch, I think Sandhagen might be the favorite if they had a rematch. So, you have guys like Jan, Sterling, and Sandhagen. And I think that's why this is a good matchup, because if Dillashaw wants to prove he's still a top 3 guy in the division, a win over Sandhagen will do that.
Yeah, you mentioned training, and I actually listened to TJ's interview with Brendan Schaub, and I don't really know how much I buy into the training notion. They're just training. They're trying to make each other better. And what TJ Dillashaw said is basically that he posed like a competitive sparring session. So I don't know how much stock I would put into that, but I do see what you're saying.
But remember, this was 4 years ago. Like if Sandhagen was having a competitive sparring session with TJ Dillashaw now, nobody would be surprised. But Cory Sandhagen of 4 years ago, who was a newcomer to the UFC, was just getting his feet wet. That should be shocking. Like if he was having a competitive sparring match with the champion of the UFC at that time, that means something. And that also means to me that because we've seen Sandhagen get so much better over time, how much better has TJ Dillashaw gotten sitting out for 2 years? I mean, I know he's gotten surgery to fix lingering injuries, but you're not getting that real in-cage competition that you would need to stay sharp. He's been off since January of 2019. So it's been a long time since he's been in the cage. It's been 2.5 years. So I'm eager to see if he is still the same TJ Dillashaw, and we'll find out on Saturday.
Yeah, I feel like if he comes back and he's the same TJ Dillashaw, I feel like the difference in this fight is going to be the takedowns. A lot of people forget the credentials that TJ Dillashaw has in the wrestling department, and we saw what happened with the fight with Sterling and Sandhagen. So maybe it could end in a similar fashion. So I'm leaning more towards TJ just because of his grappling advantage, I would say.
Yeah, I think Sandhagen's got a lot of advantages in this fight. I think that from a striking standpoint, Dillashaw's a great striker, but Sandhagen is also an elite striker in this division. And then you mentioned the takedowns. If he does take Sandhagen down, Sandhagen's pretty good off of his back as well. We can't forget that. He's a pretty good wrestler in his own right. His original background is jiu-jitsu. He did jiu-jitsu before he did anything else. So he's pretty well versed in the grappling game. I think there's a reason why Sandhagen is the favorite in this fight. And I think it's A, age, B, the fact that they have trained together before and people talk about how Sandhagen kind of gave him a headache, and C, we've kind of got old versus new. And a lot of people will side with the flavor of the week versus a guy that used to be the champion, that perhaps they might believe that he was on performance-enhancing drugs the whole time, and that that's why he was so good. Who knows? It's all perception. That's why the betting lines are the way they are. But if I had to make a lean in this fight, I think that Sandhagen's going to win, and I think he's going to win inside the distance.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. But let's drift off this. Let's drift off this card. I just want to ask you about Conor McGregor. He fought recently. It didn't really end in the way he wanted to. What did you think of the whole fight? Do you think McGregor's going to come back after such a gruesome injury, and do you want to see him back?
Well, it's hard to know how that fight would have gone, but let's look at the history here. When has Conor McGregor ever gotten better after losing a round? Like, when has he lost a round and come back? You could say the Khabib fight, where Khabib was kind of, maintaining energy, and Conor was able to get a round on him, and whether it was the third round.
Do you buy into that Conor actually won a round in that fight? Because I don't know if
I think he won that round, but that's because Khabib wasn't pulling the trigger. He was just I think that was a round where he was trying to get his energy back. I think that Conor did win that round. I think it was actually a pretty clear round, if I recall. But either way, I think that we saw how that fight was going. I don't see McGregor as being a guy that's going to get the second wind and have all this energy. And Poirier is the type of guy that gets better as the fight goes on. So we'll never know what was going to happen. But based on the evidence that we're presented with from the history of both these guys, it didn't look like it was going the right way for Conor McGregor. It didn't look like things were trending in his direction. And now he's talking about how he was injured going into the fight. He's kind of throwing the UFC under the bus by saying that, because that would mean that the UFC were kind of complicit in him. I don't know what he disclosed on his commission sheet, but the Nevada State Athletic Commission basically said if you have an injury and you don't pass a physical, you're not going to get the fight. So I don't know what happened there, but I don't think that was a great look. And I'm sure the UFC isn't pleased with that either. So
I don't know
I guess we'll see.
I don't know how much I buy the pre-existing injury, because look, if you're going into a fight with such high stakes as a trilogy fight, pay-per-view, you're headlining a pay-per-view, you have fractures in your leg, and it's Conor, you know what I mean? It's not someone that's a grappler, someone that's a boxer. Conor uses his legs a lot. So like, if you really have an injury like that, I feel like to be safe, you would postpone it, go to the next pay-per-view maybe, or the UFC will always make arrangements to fit Conor whatever suits him best. So I don't really buy that whole notion that maybe there was a bit of a fracture, but I don't think there was to the point where I guess they're making it out to be. And also, I feel like Conor should have never returned after that Mayweather fight. I feel like that was his ticket to cash out, maybe have a couple more boxing fights so he can make some more millions there. And he should have, in my opinion, never returned after that. I feel like the return to MMA after that was just a downfall of his career.
Well, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? He can't just go and box. He's under contract to the UFC, and the UFC allowed him to do that one boxing match with Mayweather. But then what, right? Like, he would have to really take them to court and have a really nasty court battle with them involving the Ali Act and things of that nature if you're going to try to pursue a boxing career full time. And then you, of course, be persona non grata with the UFC, and there would be a lot of fallout from that. But I also think that there's, the game has kind of passed him by, in the years where he could have been training in strictly in mixed martial arts, and he wasn't, and he was doing business endeavors, and he was focusing on boxing and all of that. Dustin Poirier was getting better and better and better and better and became an elite fighter. And this is what I keep saying about this fight. I don't think we know where Conor McGregor's at, because losing twice in a row to Dustin Poirier, who in my opinion is the best lightweight in the world. I know Charles Oliveira is the champion, but until Charles Oliveira beats Dustin Poirier, I think that Poirier is the best lightweight in the world. To lose twice in a row to the best lightweight in the world, the number one guy, doesn't really mean anything. It just says you're not as good as the best guy. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think he might need a step down in competition if 100%. He needs to continue. I think the Justin Gaethjes of the division, Dustin Poirier, all those guys in the top 5, it's a big threat. Let him get another fight or two with top 10. People, it's still big names that he could look good against, but for him to come back and expect for a one win and go straight into a title shot is just not realistic in my opinion.
Yeah, that's why I think RDA is the fight. Like, make RDA next year. RDA will be 38. And he's, I think, 2-4 in his last 6. If you can't beat an RDA who's 38, who's 2-4 in his last 6, the game's just passed you by. Like, it's no disrespect to Rafael dos Anjos, but a 33-year-old Conor McGregor, who's technically in his prime right now, should be able to beat a 38-year-old Rafael dos Anjos. And if he can't, then I think we just say, I don't think you're going to be champion again. And if you want to keep making big fights, you want to fight Nate, you want to fight Masvidal, you want to do fights that are going to move the needle, like, by all means, we'd love to have you, and you're still going to make a ton of money. Because Conor, this is the thing. People are like, oh, well, Conor's soiling his legacy. He's not going to be a big draw anymore. It's like, no. Conor is going to be a draw until he retires.
Absolutely.
And his legacy right now is that he was the first guy to become a 2-division champion in the UFC, simultaneous 2-division champion. And the first guy to really transcend the sport, become this multi-millionaire, one of the top earners in Forbes magazine. That's his legacy right now. A loss to Poirier doesn't hurt that legacy. It's still the same legacy. And no matter how many losses he has, unless he has this really terrible run where he loses 5-6 in a row, sticks around way too long, I still think that his legacy is kind of cemented right now. The only way that he can advance that legacy is by winning a championship. And that's why he wants to keep coming back. He wants to build upon that legacy. And it's easier said than done, especially when you've got guys that are now, like you mentioned, Justin Gaethje, Poirier, even Charles Oliveira, I think would give him a matchup nightmare unless he caught Oliveira on the chin. And even if he catches Oliveira on the chin, if he goes to the ground and tries to finish him, he's going to get wrapped up like a pretzel, right? So we still need to remember that, in order for him to advance his legacy, he needs to win another belt. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. And I still think he's one of the greatest featherweights of all time in the UFC. I don't think anything's going to take that away either. I think you can put him up there with Max Holloway, with Aldo. If you look at that run that he went on and how he was beating guys, he still is one of the all-time elite 145-pound fighters. Just so happens that now at 155 pounds, he's 1-3, which doesn't really help his case.
So I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. There's a lot of valid points there. Let me get your take on one last fight, a little bit of a step away from MMA. We have Jake Paul coming up soon against Tyron Woodley. Definitely a big step up in competition for Jake Paul, where he's finally getting a real fighter, a real MMA fighter. Not quite someone that everyone would have expected him to fight, but it's a step up nonetheless. What do you think about this matchup, and how do you see it playing out for Jake Paul?
I hope that Tyron Woodley wins. I would think that, listen, Ben Askren's an easy target. This guy was never a good striker. Tyron Woodley has been an elite striker for a long time. He's got elite power for that division. While people talk about him being a wrestler, how often did he use his wrestling during his championship, aside from defensive wrestling, when like Demian Maia tried to take him down 21 times and he kept it on the feet? The reason why he wants to keep it on the feet is because he's a fantastic striker. And he has come out and said that basically, as soon as he started MMA, he's just been training boxing, basically. He knows his wrestling is going to be in his back pocket all the time. He's not doing as much grappling as he is working on his striking. And that's kind of what made him an elite fighter and what made him a welterweight champion and one of the best welterweight champions we've ever seen. Right now it's easy to look at his recent history and say the guy's washed up or whatever. But at the same time, I still think that in a boxing match against a guy who is known for being on YouTube, he has to win that fight. Like, he just has to win that boxing match. But Jake Paul's good. Like, Jake Paul's a good boxer, and he's not fighting legitimate boxers. He's fighting guys in MMA, and striking in MMA is very different from boxing. So, if he's able to tire Tyron out, maybe he'll be able to knock him out, in the later rounds. But I think early on, Tyron's going to be a pretty big threat to Jake Paul.
Yeah, I feel like Jake Paul is choosing to fight Tyron Woodley at the perfect time. Personally, I think that Tyron Woodley is kind of broken. I don't know if that's in terms of his physicality or his mindset, but I feel like it's not the same Tyron Woodley anymore. We saw what happened in his past 3 or 4 fights. He just gets dismantled every single fight. But yeah, I would agree with you. His striking is really good, and if he could piece it all together when he's fighting Jake Paul, I feel like it could be a long night for Jake Paul.
He looked good in the Luque fight. He came out guns a-blazing. He was pushing the pace. He hurt Luque in that fight. Like that looked like the old Tyron for a little bit. So I know that that's in there somewhere. And if he can bring that out against Jake Paul, a guy, again, who is known for being on YouTube, who's 3-0 as a boxer, I would hope that Tyron Woodley would be able to win that. I would like to see Anderson Silva take on Jake Paul. I think that would be cool.
Wow, that's a great idea. I never even thought about that one. That one would be amazing.
Yeah.
But look, I think Woodley, he's a great, we've seen him have that knockout power, but it has been a while since he's knocked anyone out. And his last few fights in the UFC, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I noticed he was a bit hesitant to throw that overhand right. And that's what we know. That's where his big power comes from. That's where he gets all those beautiful highlight reel knockouts. But I feel like a lot of the reason that he hesitates, could be for the threat of a takedown, for a threat of a leg kick. Those threats won't be here in this match. So I'm hoping that Woodley will be able to let his hands go a little bit more. Because look, if he can fight confidently and without, I think, hesitating to let his hands go up, there's realistically no reason Woodley should lose. But like we've seen over his last few fights, his mentality or something just doesn't seem quite there like it used to be.
And he's talked about how he had a lot of turmoil going on in his life before some of those fights. And I think, like you mentioned, Gilbert Burns, really strong grappler and a really good wrestler. He's really improved his wrestling over the years. Colby Covington, known for his wrestling. I think you're right. I think that he was hesitant because of those threats. And then when you see him against Luque, a more striking-based fighter, he was willing to open up a little bit.
Right.
Wasn't as worried about that threat. So when you take that and you put it against a guy who's, like you said, is not going to throw leg kicks, not going to take him down. I think you're right. I think there is a good formula there for Tyron Woodley to excel in that situation.
I agree. Aaron, it was a pleasure having you on. Is there anything I guess you would like to say or share with our audience before we wrap it up?
No, just want to thank you guys for thinking of me and having me on. Spasiba to both of you. And I hope to speak with you guys again soon. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you very much. It was an honor having you on.
Spasiba to you as well, brother. We hope to have you on back soon.